For years, I paid my parents' bills. Then I overheard Mom tell a neighbor, "She's forgotten us, just sends money." I canceled all payments. A week later, their electricity was cut off. Now they thank me for every transfer I never thought I'd be. The one teaching my parents a lesson about gratitude. But life has a way of flipping the script on you when you least expect it. 5 years ago, I landed this killer job at a tech startup in Seattle, about 3 hours from the small town where my folks still live in the same split-level ranch they bought when I was 10. The gig came with stock options, a MacBook Pro that made my old Dell look like an antique, and the kind of salary that had me thinking maybe I wasn't completely screwed by student loans after all. My parents weren't exactly rolling in cash after Dad's construction company took a nosedive during the recession. Mom's part-time gig at the local library barely covered groceries, and their mortgage was like this monster hiding under the bed, getting scarier every month. So when my first big bonus hit my checking account, it felt like the most natural thing in the world to set up automatic payments for their electric, water, internet, and even throw in a nice chunk toward that mortgage. They protested at first, in that way parents do. "We can't take your money, and you should be saving for your own future." But I could see the relief in their eyes when I insisted. I mean, what else was I going to do with all that cash? Blow it on another pair of Nikes or weekend trips to Cabo? This was my family we're talking about. Fast forward to last month. I was cruising back to the hometown in my Subaru for a long weekend visit, windows down, blasting my going home playlist like I always do. Pulled into their driveway with a trunk full of fancy cheese from this bougie market in Seattle, a case of Dad's favorite IPA, and some books Mom had mentioned wanting. The usual drill. As I was grabbing my duffel from the backseat, I heard Mom's voice drifting over from the side yard. She was chatting with Mrs. Hoffman, this nosy neighbor who's lived next door since before I was born. "How's your daughter doing?" "In the big city?" Mrs. Hoffman was asking. "Oh, you know," Mom replied with this sigh that immediately made my stomach drop. "She's doing great career-wise, but she's forgotten us, really. Just sends money instead of real care. Haven't seen her in months." I froze with my hand on my bag. Months? I'd been there 6 weeks ago for Dad's birthday. We'd FaceTime just last weekend. And the money? That wasn't instead of care. It was because I cared. For a second, I thought about marching over there and calling her out, but something stopped me. Instead, I slammed my car door extra loud, yelled, "I'm here," and watched Mom scramble around the corner with a big fake smile plastered on her face. The weekend went by like normal on the surface. We grilled burgers on their back deck, watched that new Netflix show everyone's talking about, and I listened to Dad complain about the Seahawks defensive line for approximately 3 hours. But inside, I was seething. Every time Mom said, "We're so glad you could find the time to visit," I heard what she'd told Mrs. Hoffman. Every time Dad mentioned some house repair they were putting off, I wondered if they were playing me. Sunday night, I was packing up to head back when Mom handed me a Tupperware of her famous chocolate chip cookies for the road. "Thanks for coming, sweetie," she said, giving me a hug. "It means so much to have you here, more than anything else." That was the moment I decided they needed to learn exactly what anything else meant to them. Update. Y'all, the comments are blowing up. So many of you sharing similar stories has me feeling less alone in this whole mess. And to the person who asked if I felt guilty about what I did next, not gonna lie, I questioned myself a lot. But here's the real question that kept me up at night. Was I enabling my parents to take me for granted, or was I truly helping them? Looking back, I think we were all trapped in a situation none of us knew how to handle right. The next morning, I was back at my apartment in Seattle, still in my PJs, coffee in one hand and phone in the other. First call, the electric company. "Hi, I'd like to cancel the automatic payments on my parents' account." Then the water company, the internet provider, the mortgage company. With each call, I felt this weird mix of guilt and satisfaction. I didn't tell my parents what I'd done, just waited. It took exactly 7 days. My phone lit up with Dad's name while I was in a meeting. I let it go to voicemail, then listened during my lunch break. "Hey, sweetheart. We've got a situation here. The power's out, and the electric company is saying the bill hasn't been paid. There must be some mistake with your automatic payment. Can you call me back when you get a chance? It's getting pretty chilly in here." It was late October, and the temperatures in their area had been dropping into the 40s at night. Not freezing, but definitely not comfortable. I waited until after work to call back. Dad picked up on the first ring. Thank goodness. The electric company said the payment was canceled, not just delayed. "We can't figure out what happened." I took a deep breath. "It wasn't a mistake, Dad. I canceled all the payments." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "You what? Why would you do that?" I heard what Mom said to Mrs. Hoffman last weekend. "About how I've forgotten you guys and just send money instead of real care." Another long pause. "She said that?" "Yeah, she did. So I figured I'd stop sending money and show some real care instead. I'll be down in a month to help you guys figure out the bills and get caught up." "A month?" His voice cracked a little. "But how do we live a month without power?" "I don't know, Dad. How did you live before I started paying your bills 3 years ago?" I could hear Mom in the background asking what was going on. Dad muffled the phone, but I could still make out him explaining. Then Mom was on the line. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice doing that thing where it gets higher with each word. "You can't just cut us off because your feelings are hurt." "My feelings aren't hurt, Mom. I'm just respecting what you really want. You don't want my money. You want me to show I care in other ways. So that's what I'm doing." "By leaving us in the dark? Literally?" "No, by coming down in a month to help. That's real care, right? Not just throwing money at the problem." She started crying then, and I almost caved. Almost. But I remembered all the times I'd skipped happy hours with coworkers to save money for their bills. The promotion trip to New York I'd turned down because it conflicted with Dad's birthday. The fact that a third of my salary had been going to them, no questions asked, for years. I've gotta go, Mom. I love you guys. I'll see you in a month. I hung up and immediately felt like the world's biggest jerk. That night, I barely slept, wondering if I'd gone too far, but something told me we needed this reset. 3 days later, Dad called again. His voice was different. Humble. Your mother and I have been talking, he said. We've been taking you for granted. We're sorry. Have you figured out the bills? I asked. We're working on it. I picked up some extra handyman work for the neighbors. Mom's increased her hours at the library. We're managing. That's good to hear. We miss you, he added quietly. Not your money. You. That hit me right in the chest. I miss you guys too. 2 weeks later, half the time I'd originally said, I drove back down, found them bundled up in sweaters in a cold house, working by lamplight in the evenings. They'd managed to pay the water bill, but were still saving for the electric company's reconnection fee. I handed Dad an envelope with enough cash to get the power back on. He tried to refuse. Just take it, I said. But things are going to be different now. We sat down at their kitchen table and for the first time maybe ever had a real adult conversation about money, about expectations, about what family really means. We came up with a new plan. I'd help with the mortgage but not the utilities. They'd create a budget and stick to it. And most importantly, we'd be honest with each other. Update. It's been 3 weeks since the blackout incident, as we're now calling it. The comments asking if my parents resent me now have me thinking about all the silent treatments and passive-aggressive comments I expected but never received. Instead, something strange is happening. They're calling more often, but not to ask for anything, just to chat. Is this what healthy family relationships feel like? I'm headed back there this weekend, and honestly, I'm nervous. Have things really changed, or is this just the calm before another storm? The power came back on, life resumed, and slowly things shifted between us. Mom stopped making those little comments about how busy I was, or how they hardly saw me. Instead, she started asking about my job with genuine interest, remembering details about my projects and coworkers. Dad got more proactive about the house repairs, doing what he could himself rather than letting things go until I visited. They both seemed more aware of their spending, too. No more, oh, we just had to have the premium cable package, or everyone's getting these new patio sets. But the real change came at Thanksgiving. I arrived with my usual contributions, some fancy desserts from that bakery near my apartment, a bottle of decent whiskey for Dad, and found the house warm, welcoming, and different somehow. It took me a minute to realize they'd rearranged the living room, sold some of their older furniture on Craigslist, and used the money to fix the leaky kitchen faucet that had been driving everyone crazy for years. We wanted to show you we're serious, Mom said when I commented on it, about being more responsible. During dinner, Dad raised his glass in a toast. To our daughter, he said, looking me straight in the eye. Who had the guts to teach her old man a lesson he needed to learn, Mom added, and who we appreciate for everything she is, not just what she gives. I almost choked on my mashed potatoes. This kind of emotional directness was not our family's style, but I lifted my glass back to them and we shared a moment of understanding that felt more valuable than any bill payment I'd ever made. The next morning, as I was helping Mom with breakfast, she brought up the incident with Mrs. Hoffman. I need to apologize for what you overheard, she said, concentrating very hard on flipping pancakes. It wasn't true, what I said. I was just, I don't know, trying to sound like we weren't dependent on you. Like we were sad about not seeing you enough rather than grateful for your help. It was pride, and it was wrong. Thanks, Mom, I said. That means a lot. She's always bragging about how her son takes them on cruises, Mom added with an eye roll. As if that's the measure of a good child. We both laughed, and just like that, the air was cleared. After the holidays, we settled into our new normal. I still help them financially, but with clear boundaries. They call me regularly, but respect when I'm busy with work or my own life. When I visit, it feels like a choice rather than an obligation. Last month marked 1 year since the blackout incident, and Dad made a point of showing me something during my visit. He pulled out a shoebox from his closet and opened it to reveal a stack of receipts. What's this? I asked. Every bill we've paid ourselves this year, he said proudly. And this, he handed me a small notebook, is our budget. We've stuck to it for 12 months straight. I flipped through the pages, seeing their careful tracking of expenses, the places they'd cut back, the small treats they allowed themselves. It wasn't perfect. There were months when things were tight, but it was honest. I'm impressed, I told him and meant it. That night, as we sat on their back deck watching the sunset, Mom brought out 3 bottles of Bud Light from the fridge. She rarely drinks beer, but it had been a family tradition on special occasions when I was growing up. What are we celebrating? I asked, accepting the bottle. Independence, she said. Both yours and ours. Dad clinked his bottle against mine. And the fact that you cared enough to teach us a hard lesson. I was pretty harsh, I admitted. Cutting the power was maybe a bit extreme. No cap, it was exactly what we needed, Mom said, trying out slang she'd obviously learned from her teenage library patrons. I nearly spit out my beer laughing. Please never say that again, I begged. What? The kids all say it, she protested, grinning. As we sat there laughing, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. We weren't just parent and child anymore. We were 3 adults who respected each other, who could call each other out when needed, who could forgive. Update. After a year of this new relationship with my parents, I'm blown away by how much has changed. So many of you asked for another update, and yep, it's still going strong. The strangest part? Last week, Dad insisted on sending me money to help with my car repair. I tried to refuse, but he said, "Let us be your parents sometimes." I'm crying. Writing this, for real. My question now is, have I somehow crossed into an alternate universe where family relationships actually heal and grow? Because I never thought we'd get here from where we started. These days, when Mom tells Mrs. Hoffman about me, I sometimes overhear her bragging, not about my job or my money, but about how we talk 3 times a week, how I taught her to use Instagram to follow my city adventures, how Dad and I are planning a father-daughter road trip up the coast this summer. The automatic payments are back, but they're different now. They're not my default way of showing love, and they're not my parents' expected right. They're just one, part of a much richer relationship. Last week, I was helping Dad clean out the garage when he paused, leaning on an old golf club he'd been debating whether to keep. "You know," he said, "when the power went out that day, I was angry at first, then terrified. Then, and this was the worst part, I felt ashamed, like I'd failed as a provider, as a father. I started to interrupt, to tell him it was okay, but..." He held up his hand. "Let me finish." That shame was important. It made me look at myself, at the choices I'd been making, at how I'd been taking your help for granted without doing everything I could on my end. He put the golf club in the donate pile and looked at me. "Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to stop making things easy for them. You taught me that." "Just returning the favor," I said. "You taught me plenty of tough lessons growing up." He laughed. "Yeah, but you never cut off my electricity. You never gave me access to your utilities." I shot back, and we both cracked up. Later that night, as I was packing up my Subaru to head back to Seattle, Mom handed me the usual Tupperware of cookies, plus a smaller container. "What's this?" I asked. "Mrs. Hoffman's snickerdoodles," she said with a mischievous smile. She wanted to send something for that wonderful daughter who's always so good to her parents. We shared a knowing look, and I couldn't help but laugh. "Tell her thank you." "I will," Mom said, then added more seriously, "Thank you. Not just for the money, but for caring enough to be honest with us, for not giving up on us." "That's what family does," I told her. "Figures out how to love each other better." As I drove away, watching them wave from the porch of their fully powered home, I thought about how sometimes the biggest gifts we can give aren't the ones that come with automatic payments. Sometimes they're the hard conversations, the honest moments, the willingness to risk comfort for growth. And sometimes they're the simple acknowledgement that being forgotten was never the problem. Being taken for granted was. The difference matters, and now we all know it. Every family has to learn this lesson in their own way. Ours just happened to need a power outage to see the light.